Welcome to Arts First, the show that stands for freedom of expression in the arts and art for its own sake. I'm Niall Crowley and my partners in crime are Michael Owens and Wendy Earle. Today we're doing something slightly different. Firstly, as you'll have seen from our recent interview with Miriam Elia, we're now experimenting a little with video as well as audio. But more importantly, we wanted to use this episode to pause and reflect a bit on what the podcast is actually about. We launched nearly 2 years ago now, and we've evolved tentatively, one episode at a time, before hopefully finding some kind of rhythm. In that time, we've spoken to artists, writers, musicians and thinkers from Glasgow to Bishop Auckland. Some of them were long-time friends, but many are new acquaintances. And as Wendy says in the accompanying notes to this episode, most of our guests have had far more interesting things to say than we could have planned for. So if you're new to the podcast, or if you've just dipped into one or two episodes of the show, it might seem a bit eclectic, which fair comment, but we don't specialise in one single art form, but there are threads running through it all. We touch on history, education, the public's relationship with the arts, freedom of expression obviously, and the politicisation of the arts. So in this conversation we attempt to step back and explain some of those common threads, but also why we started it, why each of us got involved and what motivates us, what we love about art. We explain what we're trying to do with the project and where we'd like to take it next, and how we might grow the project and involve others. So there's no great master plan, but there are questions we think that matter and we want to keep exploring them. So we hope you enjoy the conversation and please let us know what you think. Thank you.
Hi Wendy, hi Niall, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm good.
Hi,
Thank
good,
you.
good.
What have you been up to?
Fairly busy. Just thinking about this next few sessions. Actually, Niall's been busier than me. I'm trying to prepare for the next episode we're doing, and just trying to think about more episodes that I want to kind of focus on over the next few months.
Are you able to say what you've got in the wings, what's coming through, or do you want to keep it a secret until it's out?
I think keep it a secret for now.
Oh, I was going to spill the beans. Uncharacteristically for me, Wendy is always the one who does the organising when she's back from her travels. So in anticipation of Wendy returning from South Africa, is it you've been?
Yeah.
So I've been trying to organise a couple of discussions in March and February. One is on opera, it's kind of on grassroots opera and the smaller grassroots fringe opera companies, if you like, and another one on what's going on with the National Trust. So I'm really excited about that. We've got some really great people who've agreed to talk to us, and we're doing some things on architecture and hopefully doing one on poetry, because poetry is something that's kind of been at the back of my mind for quite a while. Mm-hmm. So
but I think our general approach is we have long-term ideas and then occasionally something comes up that we really want to do. So the last episode I did with Miriam Elia, I thought about it a long time ago, but finally went for it. And the next episode is with Tiffany Jenkins. Again, we've been trying to pin that down for a while. And then after that, I'm kind of in a way relying on Niall to come up with the next 2 episodes after that. And I'd love to do something on art education and what's happening with art education, whether it's going well or going badly, because you hear different things. There's a lot of interesting themes within that. So I'm thinking about that, but not quite pinned down my line of thought yet.
See, in both of your comments, it's evident that you're really quite busy, and I've joined you relatively recently. I think you sent out an email to a bunch of people who have expressed an interest and said, hey, if anybody wants to help out. So I said, yeah, I'd love to help out. And I imagined, that what that meant was you might ask me to do a bit of editing or, or something like that, coming and cleaning your kitchens or something. I thought it was that kind of helping. But actually, very quickly, you got me involved in making 1 or 2 of the episodes work. And it's been hugely enjoyable. But I've never seen a moment when you haven't had a bunch of ideas that are bubbling away in the background. And we'd suggested that we run this episode and that we ask ourselves not so much whether there is the energy around and whether we've got enough ideas, but rather is the new year a chance to review a little bit the way it's all going and ask ourselves, are there ways to reach new audiences and to do things differently, or maybe to rethink our approach to work? So just to start us off, I wondered, it'd be interesting for me to hear you say why you started Arts First and what is it about it that encourages you to carry on?
Well, I guess I was the one who first thought about it. I've been in conversation with a couple of different people about the idea for a while, and then thought I'm just going to, in fact, I do what I usually do, is if I don't do it, nobody will. And then sort of like started trying to get people together to talk about it. And that was really useful. And I think there's a general feeling that we want, from the people I talk to and from my own motivation, is that wanting a podcast that talks about the arts from a very lay point of view, i.e. non-specialist, interested, engaged, kind of loving. I love visual arts, particularly painting, and I love the theatre and dance, and you see things going on within the arts which you don't like going on, like for example the cancellation trends and the loss of judgment, that the idea that anything is equally good, and all of these things, when you start thinking about them, they all become more complicated than your initial gut reaction is. So I just thought it'd be interested to talk about that, and people I talked to about it were very, very encouraging. But it wasn't until I talked to Niall about it at a party or something like that, and I was gabbing about it, and he suddenly said, hey, I'd love to do something like that. So without him, nothing would have existed, because I have no idea how to do the technical side and was too lazy to learn. And Niall knows all about the technical side, but is already interested in the art side. So yeah, that was sort of
Actually, the truth of it, Mick, is that when Wendy said, does anybody want to help me? And I thought I could do a little bit of editing. And the next minute I've got a microphone in front of me. And I think I just probably just taught myself into it. But yeah, I'm very interested in art and design. And I think we've all got a little bit of a background, or we've all delved or worked in the arts during our careers. I think one of the things I've been thinking about this, and maybe one of the reasons I felt I wanted to get involved and help Wendy, is seeing how, from my point of view, art, or our relationship with art, theatre, music, has kind of changed since the 1990s. And we've gone from having quite an organic public relationship with the arts to a much more managed art sphere or art sector. And I've felt kind of shoved out slightly over the last 20, 30 years. The more that there's been talk about inclusion, the more I felt slightly excluded. And I couldn't quite, not sure whether that was my prejudice and whether that's the way it was. And I wanted to explore that. So I guess Wendy offered the opportunity to really do that, because I think I'd probably started out really interested in art and design and music, but drifted away from it. I studied art and design, and eventually I ended up doing very technical things, working in print and hardly doing anything that had any kind of creative output. And I'm not sure about the idea that we're all creative, or the creative industries, or all of those kind of things. But I was interested, so I grasped the opportunity to go back and have a go and talk about things I don't really know about and get out of my depth and all of those kind of things. So yeah, that's what I ended up with.
I think the other thing, actually, I was thinking as you were talking, Niall, is we know so many people who have so many interesting things to say, but they say them in the pub or in dinner parties or in conversations here and there. So we do draw on people that we've known over the years. And I think we've done some really great episodes on the basis of that. So whether you think about Barb Younger or Miriam Elliott most recently, or Karen Garfin. There's just been so many of them who've had something to say about something that's going on, and they say it from a very personal point of view and bring out things that you wouldn't think about yourself. And I think that has been something I've taken a real sense of satisfaction from over the last year or so. And then there are all the panel discussions as well, very different, but again, you get a sense of, like, people like Manik Govinda or JJ Charlesworth. We talk about the issues and something comes to light in that process, which I think is really worth paying attention to. So that's what we want to do, is kind of put those conversations out to a wider public, and just see what comes back from that.
So I came along maybe 6 months ago. I can't remember now exactly when it was, but something like that. And it was evident to me that you are in touch with a really impressive network of people. And in part, that's because, and I'm struggling here to put it in the right way, I want to say in part that's because you're both political people. But your politics in this case doesn't really say, well, there's a certain kind of politics we want Arts First to focus on. Rather, it's a political commitment to the idea of freedom of expression, and people not being cancelled rather than being cancelled. So to me, that is attractive. The idea that you would bring along a bunch of people who probably lots of people don't agree with each other, but nonetheless, there is a space in which there is a freedom. And in that space, there are a number of really interesting people. So that's very attractive for me as an outsider coming in. And Wendy, to your point that you know a lot of people, and so far the Arts First podcast gets an energy from engaging with them and asking them and getting them, simply encouraging people to talk and engaging a wider group of people in a salon type conversation, in the idea of the kind of conversation you would have in a pub or you would have over a coffee. And that's very attractive. And then to your point, Niall, I've heard you say a number of times that what you do is you find either subjects that you're really interested in or people that you're really interested in. And then because you want to find out, you encourage them. And then next thing you know, you're right in the middle of the kind of conversation we had when we did The Ancient of Days, when we had people who've written the books and people who came from different backgrounds, a Christian and radical left person passionately agreeing and drilling into William Blake. And so that's the idea that we're interested in encouraging artists to tell us about their work because we're really interested and we want to find out. So that's how, as an outsider, how a bit of how you both have appeared to me.
Yeah. Well, I suppose a lot of it is driven by a sort of a degree of curiosity about what people might have to say about a particular issue and wanting to air some of those issues a little bit more honestly. I suppose the politicization of the arts is a particular bête noire for me, because I think that activism is threatening to destroy the arts. And I don't think it will, because I think the arts is obviously much stronger than that. And to some extent, we're talking about, people on the fringes, but people on the fringes who are not interested in the arts and the pleasure that the art brings or the insights that the art brings, but in making political points. And that seems to become a bit of a driving force, probably institutionally more than individually. It's interesting, for example, that the director of Tate has recently resigned because she just had nowhere to go with what she was doing. And those kind of shifts are really interesting to look at, but they also reflect a real tension within the arts that is something that I think we can and we should explore with people who don't see themselves necessarily as experts, but do have an opinion that is informed by more than just a sort of a gut reaction, but is informed by a bit of knowledge and thought.
Alongside that, I think what interests me with the activism and the politicization of arts and the control of the arts with funding and all of those diversity things that you have to conform to is how people survive and thrive, and how they continue, and how they remain independent and carry on under the radar. And that's a little bit why I guess I was interested in fringe opera, all these small opera companies and drama groups and choir groups, and the people who just carry on, and also the people who find themselves cancelled because they're artists, they're singers, they're dancers and choreographers who didn't expect to have this avalanche just land on them, completely devastated by it. But how do they pick themselves up? How do they continue? How do you carry on with your work and with your art? So there's those kind of, not contradictory, but dual processes going on that I really like exploring. And going on from that, it made me think about a really good thing that Wendy has done is keep from the start us steady on these principles of freedom of expression in the arts, and celebrating art for art's sake, as opposed to art being used as some kind of instrument of social and economic policy, which takes it absolutely nowhere. Whereas I'm a gadfly. I'm like, oh, what's that? That's interesting. Where did we go with that kind of thing? So we talked about how we're eclectic. Is that a plus point or is that a negative point? How do we deal with that, and how do we marry the two things, I guess?
So with that said, I wonder therefore, what are the unifying themes for Arts First? Is it a commitment to eclecticism? And is it that thing about giving a voice to those people who would otherwise be cancelled, or who are suffering from the deadening impact of the institutional imperatives? Or are there other unifying themes? So what are the principles? What's the kind of raison d'etre for Arts First looked at from that perspective?
Well, I think our attention is always drawn by people who've been cancelled or have come under attack. But I suppose we also, I think this is something that Niall's very good at in particular, actually, is that of coming back to the art itself. So being interested in the kind of what is it that people are doing in the arts. And I think what we want to do with that is develop those themes a little bit more around to do with skill. That's one of the reasons why I'm interested in arts education, is the sense that the idea of skill has been lost in the arts. But has it really? I'm not sure. We're living in the postmodern era, and postmodernism did a lot to tear apart the assumptions of the past. And then I think we're not alone in looking back more to tradition and thinking about the importance of those traditions and how they are built on into the future to make things that are worth looking at and paying attention to. I suppose the eclecticism is partly just to do with the specific content. So someone like David Ireland, who we've known for a few years, I don't think I've ever actually met him face to face. He's really good at what he does. He's an incredibly good playwright. He writes television and theatre. And you want people to talk about him and know about him. But when we're focusing on a particular art form, and we want to diversify more than we've done in a way, we want to look at people who do really good art, do something really that we think is worth talking about and knowing about. But then on the other side, there are issues that need to be aired. I guess that's where freedom, my feeling is that actually the arts can only really develop in freedom. So you do look at places like Iran and wonder, how can any good art develop there? Because there is no freedom. And the question is, well, does any good art? Maybe good art does develop there because actually people find a way of doing what they love doing despite everything. But you can't help feel that the arts suffer because of that lack of freedom, and that the arts flowered in the Renaissance and flowered in periods afterwards because there was a freedom where artists felt they could burst forth and, would have an audience for what they wanted to do. So broadly and historically, that's always the kind of thing that I'm interested in, is the relationship between society and art that allows art to take off and flourish and flower. And when does it not flower? And are we in a period when it's flowering or not flowering?
So I know that you've both, and you've invited me to try to rehearse or to focus on what are the themes that inform Arts First, and are we clear? I just wonder, I'm sure that you are interested in the regular listeners and the people and friends and the supporters of Arts First that you're interested in hearing from people and taking views on that point. In this moment of reflection, do you want to put a call out for other people to pitch in?
No, we're not interested at all in what anyone else thinks. Here's what we think, take it or leave it. No.
That's a relief. Good. So if anyone did want to interrupt you,
no, absolutely.
I just have, then what would they do?
Well, if people want to get in touch, there's all kinds of ways that they can do that. But it is part of the lifeblood. It's what I think makes this a project unique. That's why it's not simply a podcast or a show from the arts world talking down to people. It is very much, we're trying to make it very much from the point of view of the public, and the more people we involve sharing their views and them letting us pick their brains, the better it becomes. We were talking about favourite episodes earlier, and we've done almost 40 now, which is amazing, and I'm surprised. I thought we were going to give up after about 5. But the one that keeps sticking in my head was back to David Ireland, when we managed to persuade an old friend of ours, Linda Murdoch in Glasgow, to go see the play. I think she was going to see David Ireland's play, The Fifth Step, when it premiered up there. And she took along her 2 adult children. And what resulted was a just really interesting, intelligent conversation where they were talking and arguing and toing and froing about what they thought of the play. Oh, did you say that? Oh, I didn't realise that, But it was really smart. And I thought it was really uniquely us. It was unlike anything else, and it wasn't too difficult to get Linda and the family on board, but that's the kind of thing I always want to do. And people say, oh no, I'm not an expert. But what we were saying earlier about the friends and the people that we know, there's so many interesting ideas and angles that I think they're really useful, really just bring things to life. And for me, the arts it's eclectic because it's organic. It's organic in the sense that it isn't just handed down and curated for you. It's about you following the conversations and what arouses your interest and what's in the news and what's on. So that's, for me, always what it is. But that's also why we need some themes to keep us on the straight and narrow as well, to pull us back to, we're about freedom, we're about standards, we're about this, but oh, isn't that interesting over there? So I think for me, it's just pulling people in and saying, what are you doing? Talk to us about that and tell us about that.
Yeah.
So it's not just that we need more hands, which we do, but it's really important. It just makes it unique, makes it worthwhile.
But I also think it's the conversations you have, like at parties or whatever, where somebody says something, why don't you do, like somebody was talking to me recently about doing something on aura in art. And I thought, oh, yeah, that could be interesting. It's like these little sparks, or collecting art, or, you know what I mean? It's like there are things that people think about in their own relationship to art, about, why is there a big thing about original works of art versus copies and that kind of thing. And that's quite a long-standing debate within the arts. But actually, bringing it up to date or talking about it in the terms of, if you like, people who are just living their lives but are taking an interest in arts, that's a conversation to have. So then it's the question is, how do you shape it up into an episode that has a kind of clear sense of direction and focus, and that will only last 30 to 40 minutes, which is the other limit we set ourselves. But we are really interested in people who've got ideas and something we can just have a conversation about. And it might take a few months to pull it together and slot it in. But anybody who's ever mentioned an idea to me, I think I can say truthfully, I've gone home and written it down, and it's on my list of things to think about, and it might pop up. But, it's those conversations that keep us going in a way, because you can't have your own ideas all the time. It's actually other people's ideas.
But actually, it probably is worth turning the tables on Mick now. Now we've got our claws into you. You were extraordinary. We started making a podcast on carols, and within a moment, you had just accumulated all this material, interviews with preachers and folk people and jazz journalists, and just I almost didn't have Christmas because you were just piling me with this material, and we found an incredible resource in you. Could you tell us a little bit about your interest, what drew you to it?
Well, I suppose, like you, Niall, I feel as if my interest in the arts and interest in those conversations with people who are alive to what is going on in art and a curiosity. And there's an energy, and I like it when I got hold of it, and it was really exciting. So that's what drives me. And I would just encourage anybody who said, hey, I want to help out, I want to be part of your network, then find a way to make an episode happen. Get in touch with Wendy, get in touch with Niall, speak to me if you want to, but work out a way to flag up what you think that Arts First should be covering, because that's the way that it will grow, because it is all about people who are interested in what is going on in the world of the arts. But I mean, specifically on the music scene, I decided a few years ago that I'd like to have a go at singing, like loads of people who join community choirs at the moment. I did that. And I think you were having a conversation a few months ago about the 18 different people that you were about to do some work with to make a podcast. And I was feeling a bit, oh, well, I don't know what to do. And so that just sprang to mind. Well, hey, why don't I do something about music? And you'd already done something on choirs. So you said, hey, Christmas is coming up. Let's focus specifically on carols. And all I did, in true Nile spirit, was to get in touch with those people who knew something about the subject and asked them to speak about it. And what I found was that actually there were a whole number of people who had some really interesting things to say. And it was really easy to get the material. You just had to sit down with people and ask them, and there you were. And the challenge was the other way, just as you said. And so we ended up with 4 episodes. It's about following curiosity, really, and about allowing people to tell you why they are passionate or tell you about the things that they know. I'm kind of aware of a tension, if you like, between, on the one hand, doing that, and, as you say, asking people from a Christian faith what it is that the carols mean to them, balanced with, if you like, the more political character of what Arts First does, and that kind of stride and commitment to freedom in the arts. And so, I think there's a nice tension there between following anything that is aesthetically interesting and seeing what is out there, and on the other hand, staying true to something which has a distinctive Arts First set of values about it. Hey, it's getting quite late, and I just wonder, anything else that either of you would like to say by way of closing?
Yeah, well, the only thing I was just thinking as we were talking just now was the sense that I suppose the thing that keeps me going at some level is that it's like putting down a marker of some of these ideas where we're basically building up an archive, and who knows what will happen in the long term. I mean, we're living in very changing, troubled times, but I think the very fact that people want to talk about the arts in a real way, like in a grounded way, is something that I think that there's a kind of a sanity or a rationality there. I don't know, something there that isn't just flailing around. It's just trying to work, what is it that makes life worth living beyond the politics, but also within the politics. And yeah, it'll go on as long as it goes on, but part of that is to do with people responding and feeding back to us and giving us further ideas and our energies, and we'll see where it goes. Maybe have another conversation in another year and see what's happened between now and then.
That was very good.
Time produce a few more episodes.